The United States Supreme Court building is one of the most imposing, a worthy meeting place for the highest tribunal of the land.
That tribunal began meeting to decide America's most important issues back in 1790, when 6, not 9 justices met. Fast forward to the 2020 race for the White House, and now there are calls for as many as 15.
Okay, we're going to stop there. Obviously, this is probably something you haven't heard much on mainstream media, but yet one of the most critical developments in politics today. Because now the Democratic hopefuls, hope nots, I'd rather call them, have found a new plan of attack. Now they are attacking the SCOTUS. That's right, the Supreme Court of the United States of America. They want it completely upended. I'm going to read the article here published on Fox News. Senate Dems deliver stunning warning to Supreme Court. Heal or face restructuring. Now, the word heal is what we're going to focus on today. What needs to be healed exactly? We're going to go in just for a few clues. Several high-profile Senate Democrats warned the Supreme Court in pointed terms this week that it could face a fundamental restructuring if justices do not take steps to heal the court in the near future. In other words, we don't like what you're ruling on. We don't like the agreements that you're making. We don't like how you're structured, although our Constitution and the way the Supreme Court is structured is to be a complete separation of power, there to report to nobody, to be a complete bipartisan entity. So for senators to come out and chastise them to change is against everything this country stands for. But I continue. The ominous and unusual warning was delivered as part of a brief filed Monday in a case related to a New York City gun laws. Aha, there's the key, isn't it? Back to the gun debate. But now they're going to attack it through the Supreme Court. I'm going to continue, though, because this isn't the first time in history this has been done. And this isn't a sexy topic. I understand that. But anything that attacks our Constitution and our American way of life, you can be assured I will always cover, no matter if it's going to get clicks or not, because the American public, you, needs to be informed about exactly what's happening. So who partakes in this entire chastising of the Supreme Court? It goes on. Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat. Richard Blumenthal, Democrat. Mazi Hirono, Democrat. Richard Durbin, Democrat. Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat. Reference rulings by the court's conservative majority in claiming it is suffering from some sort of affliction which must be remedied. The Democratic rhetoric is out of control at this point in time. Now attacking. If we let these outlandish senators take control, everything that our country stands for would be torn apart in seconds. And hence, without a conservative Supreme Court, but you want to know something? There's even evidence that that's not entirely true. I'm going to show you towards the end of the broadcast, and you'll scratch your head wondering, where did this come from? Because based on the rulings, they have no ground to stand on. But we're going to continue just a little bit further. Here, if you yet haven't subscribed to justiceanight.com, please do. It assures that I can bring you these broadcasts, this information, which is just so critical to everything happening around us today. Now indicated by the yellow arrow, you type in your email. You'll be alerted when I post a broadcast. Just below that is my donation portal. And then, of course, my alternate platforms like Parler we're promoting today. You'll hear the Epic Times and InfoWars and, again, more Epic Times. And who's this guy? That's right. That's me. Because this is where people are going now to find the news they actually want to hear, just like they go to my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, please do. But now back to the broadcast.
15. You have 15 members, but only 10 of them are appointed in the political fashion. 5 of them can only be seated by unanimous agreement of the other 10.
Expanding the Supreme Court is exactly what he's talking about, but he wasn't alone.
Senator Elizabeth Warren told Politico expanding the high court is, quote, a conversation that's worth having. The Constitution doesn't mandate a number of Supreme Court justices. 9 have sat on the bench since 1869.
1869, but it's not good enough now. So Elizabeth Warren and Buttigieg coming out and saying we need to expand it. But it's funny because even one of their own implicitly disagrees with this. Listen in here. This is Biden back in 1983.
Roosevelt clearly had the right to send to the United States Senate and the United States Congress a proposal to pack the court. It was totally within his right to do that. He violated no law. He was legalistically absolutely correct. But it was a bonehead idea. It was a terrible, terrible mistake to make, and it put in question for an entire decade the independence of the most significant body, including the Congress, in my view, the most
independent body, which needs to remain independent from the Senate, from the House, from the executive branch. It always has, it always does. It's what their function is. Even one of their own standing against exactly what they're asking, calling it a bonehead idea, packing the court because they're not getting the decisions that they like. So that, again, warrants change, because none of these Democratic hopefuls stand for anything but changing the very foundations and institutions of the United States of America. I continue.
Then there's Bernie Sanders, who wants something in the middle.
I do not believe in packing the court, but I do believe that constitutionally we have the power to rotate judges to other courts. And that brings in new blood into the Supreme Court.
Senator,
Let's rotate justices. Captain Communism coming out, because that's exactly who I'm going to listen to about the structure of America. Rotating Supreme Court justices would be unconstitutional. The oath of judicial office requires, the federal law requires judges to administer justice without respect of persons, including Bernie Sanders, by the way, and to impartially discharge their judicial duties. But on June 27th, Senator Bernie Sanders promised he would never appoint any nomination, any justice to the Supreme Court unless that justice is 100% clear he or she will defend Roe v. Wade, a political opinion. It's why I hate the whole vetting process of Supreme Court officials in themselves by politicians, because they're going to make sure that whatever agenda they're on is what they represent, which is terrifying when you think about all the agendas out there right now, between red flag laws, gun confiscation, freedom of speech, tech tyranny, everything we're facing. But yet we're going to now allow these ideologies to impart and infuse themselves. And if we don't like it, we'll just rotate you out, according to Bernie Sanders. If we don't like it, we'll just shove more of you in, according to Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren. You see the principles crumbling and eroding in front of us if any of this was to go through. Now, I want to be very clear. The reason I sit here and preach this to you every day is to assure that we educate. People realize that these small sideline issues aren't small sideline issues. No, they're major issues because, again, history is repeating itself.
The Constitution doesn't mandate a number of Supreme Court justices. 9 have sat on the bench since 1869. The last time the court got even close to making a significant change, 82 years ago.
I will appoint justices who will not undertake to override the judgment of the Congress.
President Franklin Roosevelt was so upset the right-leaning
who did nothing ever to hurt our country or sell us into the New World Order at all. So yet he's the last one who tried to do exactly what the Democratic candidates are doing. The Democrat candidates are doing today. Scratch your head and be terrified. Rightfully so.
Supreme Court in 1937 would not go forward with his New Deal plan that he tried to add more justices. Supreme Court packing was born.
It was a great political disaster for him. The Congress, even his own vice president, wouldn't support it.
Paul Smith has argued in front.
Okay, so back then, people actually realized this wasn't good, and they fought against it, including his own vice president. Now, today, hello, my friends, and I very rarely do this. I'm breaking into my own broadcast. As you know, who follow me very closely, we stay so far ahead of the news that occasionally there is critical updates that become available that are so important to the discussion. You'll see here 5 Democratic senators just declared all-out war on the Supreme Court. What goes around comes around. That tells you the slight of this article. Nonetheless, this all has to do with the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the city of New York. As you see here on your screen, there's the actual case that is being taken up. This gives back gun rights potentially. This restores the full scope of the Second Amendment. Hence why they are so against everything that's happening. The long and short of this is there is now Brett Kavanaugh. And because of that, they went lock, stock, and barrel, declaring all-out war on the Supreme Court. And I'm going to read you their filing, which is the critical moment. But just know they're declaring that today 55% of Americans believe the Supreme Court is mainly motivated by politics. 59% believe the court is too influenced by politics, and a majority now believe the Supreme Court should be restructured in order to reduce the influence of politics. But now let's go to their briefing. And by the way, just so nobody forgets, the only time you could refer to the Washington Post is when they're actually going against the conservative base, so you know this is accurate. It took the conservatives 50 years to get a reliable majority on the Supreme Court. Here are 3 reasons why. Well, now that we have this reliable majority, as they so declare, they are going to do anything in their power to change the Supreme Court before it changes back or turns back rulings that they had 50 years to destroy the Constitution with. Long and short, that is my opinion, and I will stand by it till the bitter end. Here's the court case, the actual filing, number 18280. We're going to go down a little bit further. Amici curiae, which is basically saying these are friends of the court. They are not involved in the case. However, we have something we want to say that we feel may impact the case. This is the senators that I had mentioned earlier in the broadcast. Actually, I can just step back very quickly. You'll see again, Mazi Hirono, Sheldon Whitehouse, who's the leading force behind this, Richard Durbin, Richard Blumenthal, Kirsten Hillebrand are all coming out, and they prepared this filing. Nonetheless, we're going to go into it to stem the growing public belief that its decisions are motivated mainly by politics. The court should decline invitations like this to engage in so-called quote-unquote projects. You see, this is a direct attack on the Supreme Court. They have no right. They can put this briefing through. Anybody can, of course. But the audacity by which they are declaring, they are making stark accusations against Brett Kavanaugh, basically saying the only reason you were put in place was for political means, because those that back you, in particular, to pointing out here, the lead petitioner parent organization, the National Rifle Association, promoted the confirmation and perhaps selection of nominees to this court who it believes would break the tie in Second Amendment cases. During last year's confirmation proceedings, the NRA spent $1.2 million on television advertisements declaring exactly that. 4 liberal justices, they quote, oppose your rights to self-defense, the NRA claimed. 4 justices support your right to self-defense. President Trump chose Brett Kavanaugh to break that tie. So in other words, if you really read what they're declaring here, they're saying we, as a Democratic Party, don't believe in the Second Amendment, and how dare the sitting president appoint somebody that may believe in the Second Amendment. The disgusting nature by what is in these actual filings that the mainstream media will absolutely not cover, because they want to go over political agendas only, as we now know is their suppression machine. And you might as well consider MSNBC, CNN, and all the likes a member of the government at this point, at least the deep state side of the government, because all they report on is things that harm us, or they lie to us to assure you're not getting actual information. It's why I broke into my own broadcast. Now, the NRA came back equally as blunt. The NRA strongly supports Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the U.S. Supreme Court because he will protect our constitutional rights to keep and bear arms. God bless. Yes, of course. What's wrong with that statement? They're vilifying that statement at this point in time, saying this is a lobbyist, big companies, that the only reason Brett Kavanaugh is there is because of these lobbyists. This is the filing, my friends. This isn't me. This is exactly what I said. The Supreme Court is divided. Liberal justices oppose your rights, and they can continue on. Out in the real world, again, back to the senators and their writing, Americans are murdered each day with firearms in classrooms or movie theaters or churches or city streets, and a generation of preschoolers is being trained in active shooter survival drills. In the cloistered confines of this court, and notwithstanding the public imperatives of these massacres, the NRA and its allies brashly presume, in word and deed, that they have a friendly audience for their project. Well, they do have a friendly audience for their so-called project. It's called Those That Believe in the Constitution. I need to point out to everybody specifically how they are attacking us. They are attacking our rights and our constitutional rights and amendments within, simply by vilifying and making it seem to the general American public, who won't dig in very deep, those sheeple out there, that this isn't right. The writings themselves tell you the anti-American stance these senators have. The court and the country have witnessed an accompanying explosion of strategic faux litigation. Cases fabricated to bring issues before the court when litigants presume it will give them policy victories. For example, we have seen flocks of freedom-based public interest law organizations that exist only to change public policy through litigation, and which often do not disclose their funders. The Supreme Court is not well well, and the people know it. Perhaps the court can heal itself before the public demands it be restructured in order to reduce the influence of politics, particularly on the urgent issue of gun control. A nation desperately needs it to heal because we had it for 50 years, and we weren't nearly done destroying the Constitution the way we want it. We weren't nearly done recrafting the Constitution to the point that we needed it. We weren't nearly done destroying America. So how dare, and you know I stand by no one person individually. I stand by their actions only. And that may even vary for the person depending on what they're deciding, good and bad. But in this case, this is despicable and disgusting in black and white. Because now the Democrats can no longer handle the fact that they have lost control on potential decisions that actually reestablish constitutional rights that we were given by our founding fathers. So rather than just accept it and try to litigate the case as is the law by an impartial Supreme Court, or what's supposed to be an impartial representation of people within the Supreme Court, no, they'd rather change the Supreme Court by trying to add members, destroying its entirely, ruining how it's operated for all these years, because for 50 years they didn't have enough time to completely destroy you and I. And it's why you saw my thumbnail, me point at the screen, because for everybody, we need to wake up, because this is one of, again, the most significant constitutional developments that is happening right now. If this was to change the way the Supreme Court works, my friends, game over. This cannot be allowed to continue. This is as anti-American as it comes. This is an all-out declaration of war on the Supreme Court of the United States, and in such and in kind on the American people by the Democratic Party. There is no mincing words on this. I say no. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. I can't thank you each enough for being here.